What are you wearing?
A Canadian tuxedo.
Canadian
I'm a hockey player. Let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.
To all you Blues fans, we're bleeding blue with you. Let's go Blues! Let's go Blues! Let's go Blues!
Presented by Scott Credit Union. Yours.
I think you were muted, Guy. I cannot hear you currently.
Oh, there we go. I don't know why that
There we
happened.
go.
Oh, man, we lost the great introduction. Oh, no. Well, let's try that again. The Blue Note Band Report. I am excited, Justin. I'm really, all I got to say is thank you, man. You have set up a great guest, and I appreciate you, and we'll introduce him here in a second. Former coach of the Springfield Thunderbirds, and before that, San Antonio Rampage. He coached the Blues for approximately a year. Now, I will say this before we introduce him, and before Justin introduces him, today's show, when it comes to comments, stand back. I mean, you can put your comments out there, but I will not be posting them like I normally do. If I see something that is a good question for Drew, I will post it. Otherwise, towards the end of the show, we might open it up to questions. Your comments are welcome, but keep them civil and polite. Thank you so much. And now, Justin, this is your guest. Go for it, my friend.
I was very excited. I appreciate this individual giving us the time of day for an interview. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce former AHL Springfield Thunderbirds coach from 2018 to 2023 and St. Louis Blues head coach from 2023 to 2024, Drew Bannister. Welcome to the show, my friend. So good to have you
here. Thanks for having me, Justin. I appreciate you guys having me on.
We are just thrilled, and thank you so much.
Oh, not a problem.
I was super excited to get you lined up for this interview. I was very excited. It's a big accomplishment for myself being so young into the podcasting realm here, and I'm wanting to only grow myself more and more. But I think the first thing that I kind of want to ask, just for you, Drew, is what have you been up to? Are you still coaching? Or what's going on with Drew Bannister?
Yeah, so a little bit of both, a little bit of coaching, and then a little bit of family time. Obviously, when I got let go with the Blues, I came back home to my family, and I think when you go through something like that I did, or any coach that is in that situation, you kind of take a step back from hockey for a couple months and kind of go through an evaluation process of yourself as a whole, but also immerse yourself with your family and things that are going on with your kids that you tend to miss when you're doing the job that we do. So I had the opportunity to do that, and had a lot of good times with our family for a couple months, and then a couple times I went out to some junior hockey teams here in Canada and in the US and sat in with some coaches and spent weeks just kind of immersing myself with each team and helping the coaching staff out and being around with the players. Typically, right around this time of year is the hiring time. So last year I went through a process with a few teams and some interviews that went right down to the end, and similar to what's happening right now. I did have a couple opportunities. I decided that it just wasn't the right time for me. This past year, I went over to the Spangler Cup and coached for Canada at the Spangler Cup in Davos, Switzerland. And then just recently, I coached the U18 Canadian team at the World Hockey Championships in Slovakia.
Great. Wonderful that you're keeping busy. And I know I've been fired from a couple of jobs myself. I know it's not easy to deal with. I'm going to kind of go back and way back. And this is usually my favorite question to ask. Tell us about where you grew up and how you got into hockey. And when did you know that hockey was what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, obviously being a young Canadian and growing up where I did in Northern Ontario, now my dad was a bank manager for the Bank of Montreal. And we moved around quite a bit as a young child. We settled in Sudbury, Ontario, where I played minor hockey. Up to then, I lived in North Bay. Started kind of playing AAA hockey in North Bay. But most of my hockey in minor hockey was in Sudbury. Where I played AAA hockey and played with some really good young players there. Todd Bertuzzi was one. Him and I grew up together. We were just kind of down the street from each other. So we had a connection through hockey and school and friends and continue to be very good friends. But, there was a lot of good hockey players in Northern Ontario. Steve Sullivan was another one that was in our age group that played up in Timmins. The Cloutier brothers were in Sault Ste. Marie. Kenny Belanger was in Sault Ste. Marie. To name a few. Brian Savage was my next door neighbor. He's a couple of years older than me, but we used to walk to school every day. Another great athlete, played for the Montreal Canadiens. So, my minor hockey path mostly was in Northern Ontario. And from there, I was drafted to Sault Ste. Marie, where I went and played my junior hockey. Spent 4 years there, and then was drafted to Tampa Bay in the NHL and went on to a 17-year career from there.
Real quick, a follow-up to that. What was draft day like for you?
Which part? Which one? The OHL one or the NHL one?
The NHL one.
Yeah, the NHL one was special. And back in that day, they typically used to hold it in the Montreal in the Forum, right? That was their typical spot. So it was that year was in the Forum. I was drafted by Tampa Bay, and to be honest with you, I never interviewed with Tampa Bay. And probably the reason why one of their head scouts and happened to be one of my teachers in Sault Ste. Marie. They were very close to their Esposito family members. So they had good intel right away. They didn't interview me. So it was a little bit of surprise when they called my name at pick 26. I thought it was going to go a little bit earlier than that to Detroit, but they bypassed on me and I went 2 picks later.
Justin?
So that's a great, this is a great question from Guy here, because I kind of want to follow up. So obviously for most people honestly didn't know much on your playing career. I know they more so know you for the coaching side of things. Was there somebody that was a mentor that you really looked up to that really, solidified yourself in saying, okay, hey, I was a player, but I want to get into the coaching side of things?
I've had a lot of good coaches that I really enjoyed. Obviously, the number one that sticks out to me is Teddy Nolan. I had him 4 years in Sault Ste. Marie when I was there. We went to 3 Memorial Cups. We won the one in the Sioux. In his tenure when I was there. And I really looked up to Teddy and how he supported and respected his players and communicated with his players. And I think that was something that was very uncommon back in those days, the communication aspect and the respect that the coaching staff themselves had for it. Danny Flynn at the time was our assistant coach, and Danny's had a long history of coaching in major junior hockey and throughout Hockey Canada. Followed Teddy around a little bit in the NHL with the Islanders and Buffalo at the time too. But one of the smartest men that I've ever met in hockey and detailed. But going into my pro career, I had Ronnie Lowe in Edmonton. Really respected him, a player's coach for tons of energy. Some of the other coaches that I had over in Europe. I think when I look back at my career and playing, I think there's positive and negatives that you take from the coaches that you go through. And as you get towards the end of your career like I did, and I wanted to continue to stay in the game, you kind of start to build your resume in coaching, and that's kind of how I got into it a little bit before. I ended my career. I started, involving myself in minor hockey in Sudbury, working with, NOHA and the U17 program. That kind of went for me going into the Hockey Canada program and U17 program, doing my high performance 1 and high performance 2 coaching levels with Hockey Canada, which got me, quite honestly, got me a job right out of playing and retiring and becoming an assistant coach in All and Sound under Greg Ireland and Dale DeGray that ran the team there. And from there, I ended up going back to the Sioux where I played my junior hockey and became my first head coaching gig.
Yeah, incredible story. So I have my questions kind of, one's going to be a quick one and one might be a little bit longer, and it kind of plays off of that. My first question is, you're a defenseman. You scored 5 goals in the NHL. Do you remember all 5 of them, and which one was the most memorable if you do?
I think the first one's always the most memorable, and probably, well, one, because it was your first one, but it was against Dominic Hasek, and I scored 2 on him in my career. So
there aren't many people that can say that.
Yeah. So I can say I scored on probably, the best goaltender ever to play the game, really. There's a few other ones out there, but he's got to be up there in the top 3. There's no question about that.
You kind of talked about what my other question was going to be, but I want to still kind of ask it. I don't know how in-delved you got into the St. Louis culture, but Whitey Herzog, well-known coach of the Cardinals, wrote a couple of books. And in one of his books, he talked about him not being like a stellar player and sitting on the bench and going, if I want to stay in this game, I better learn everything about it. Yeah. Did you have a moment like that when you were playing, or something that kind of led you into coaching that way? What was it that really got you saying, I should coach?
I think what attracted me, one, to the game first and foremost as a player, was the camaraderie of the players that you're playing with, regardless of what level you're playing with. I think the lifelong friendships that I've gathered throughout my career, from minor hockey to junior hockey to pro, that's something that you can't take away from the game. The championships that I won, whether it was in the Sioux, winning the Memorial Cup there, winning a World Junior Gold with Canada, winning a Calder Cup in Hartford, won a few different championships over in Europe. A lot of those things go a long way. And I think when you're starting to get out of the game, when you've gone through those things in your life as a player, and the enjoyment and the work that goes into it, it's hard to give up on it. And as a player getting towards the end of my career, it was something that I wanted to continue to chase, was, as a player, win championships, but have the opportunity as a coach to teach the players what it takes to win those types of championships. And I think that's what drove me to get myself into coaching and start building my coaching resume.
Great. Justin, your turn, bud.
So I want to kind of get into your time with the St. Louis organization, but I kind of wanted, we've heard so much and such a great story behind, the history behind why you've decided to go into coaching, what your influences were. Touching on the St. Louis organization, I mean, what was it like getting to play with or coach the Springfield Thunderbirds? A team down there that you had quite a lengthy stint down there, and you got to see some great players down there. Yeah,
so I think just the story with that is, when you're going, where I was in Sault Ste. Marie, and I think, teams, NHL teams, they have a lot of scouts that are obviously, whether they're working in the OHL, the Western Hockey League, United States college, over in Europe. I think they're constantly in contact with general managers and other people within their organizations, and I'm sure they're reaching out to, the next coach. And that I came in contact with Doug in my last year, and we had some real good conversations. I'd never met Doug before, and went through the interview process while we were in the finals of the Ontario Hockey League Championship at that time. and lost to Hamilton, and mainly because Robbie Thomas kind of stuck it to us pretty good in that series. So, but I kind of went through that process and was offered the opportunity to coach at the time in San Antonio, where the American Hockey League team was. Obviously, in our second year before COVID hit, the team was sold. We knew that we were going to be relocating at that time. We didn't know where. Ended up in Springfield, but my time in San Antonio and then into Springfield, and I will say, I thought, probably the best move that we did for the American Hockey League and the players at that time was to go to Springfield. And I think it's been, my time there, and even, past when I've left, I think you see a lot of players being developed right now throughout that organization. One, I really believe that the Blues have done a real good job of drafting, and I think they're in a situation right now where they have a lot of young players that are pushing at the door to come in and be able to play, and it says a lot about that organization. But the 8 years that I spent with St. Louis, and not too many coaches can say that they can spend 8 years in an organization and work with the people that I did. But nothing but positive things about St. Louis and the people that I worked there. I have a great relationship with Doug to this day. I speak to him quite often. Managed to catch up with him a little quickly at the U18s when they were over there scouting the teams over in Europe for the draft this year. So, but certainly, coaching the American Hockey League, going through the process with some of those players, seeing the players come from junior or college to the American Hockey League and then realize their dreams and being a small part of that step to getting them to the NHL, to get their opportunity. Obviously, when they get to the NHL, it's up to them how long they stay. But certainly, when I look back on my career, with St. Louis, I think there's, at least 20 to 30 players that I had come through my door that either played in the NHL or continuing to play in the NHL.
Yeah, you definitely had a front door. So I'm going to go. I saw 2 questions from the audience that I'd like to get to. One's kind of a fun question. One's from somebody who you may know, and then I'll go to my question. So the first question comes from former show co-host Ashley Jones. She says, "What was your favorite St. Louis food?"
Oh, geez, that's a good question. I don't know if I had any time. I was. To be honest with you, I didn't get out a lot there in St. Louis. You spend a lot of hours at the rink, and then you're on the road a lot. So my favorite food was me cooking for myself when I had time to. I didn't that was one thing that I didn't quite to get enjoy. And as much as I lived in the Clayton area and I love Clayton, the biggest part for me was being able to get out around, later at night and walk around and get some exercise. And there's some great parks and great restaurants there too, which I enjoyed. But a lot of times when you're at the rink from 6 a.m. till 4 or 5 o'clock on a practice day, by the time you get home, you're just kind of wiped out. You don't want to do anything. You've been around people all day and had a lot of conversations. You just want to kind of keep to yourself. So I didn't get out a lot as much as I'd like to, but I did get out. I saw quite a few Cardinals games. I really enjoyed going to see baseball. My father-in-law was a big Cardinals fan, so he appreciated me being able to go to the games. Like I was able to get my family out when they were in town. So I was able to get out to a couple of things, to the zoo and different things like that, and enjoy those types of things. But the food aspect, probably I wasn't able to get out and enjoy as much of the food as I could.
I can't remember the name of the place, but did you hit Jim Campbell's place while you were in Clayton? I think it was still there while you were there.
Jim Campbell's.
Yeah, Soup, former Blues player, one of the alumni. He had a bar in Clayton right down there, and the name of it escapes me. I did a couple of shows from there. And
there's a couple places and I know Chaser's involved in a place down there that I went to with a couple of players. It slips my mind, but I think it's a membership place where you kind of have to have a membership. So yeah. Chaser he's such a good guy, right? Like he'll do anything for anybody that works or plays for the Blues. And he was kind enough to get us in there without having a membership.
JP Fields, that was the name of it. Thank you, AC Jenner. JP Fields. And then the other question I had that came up, and this was, you may know this person, Samantha Rose Robinson. She's pretty kind of connected as a fan of the Thunderbirds.
Okay.
Yes. What was your reaction when Joel Hofer got the goalie goal in the Calder Cup run for the Thunderbirds when you were the head coach?
I don't know. It's like one of those things that it's kind of like you kind of look down the bench at your other coaches and did that go in kind of moment, kind of shocking kind of moment. It wasn't like an exciting like for the players. It's extremely exciting because they're on the ice, they're in the moment, and when you're a coach and you're kind of behind the play a little bit, you see the play develop. And previous to that, he had taken, I think, at least one or two shots at the goal and just had missed it. I was more surprised that they kept dumping it in on him, knowing that how well he can play the puck. And to me, he's, him and Binner play the puck as good as anybody at the National Hockey League level. But to be that deep in a series and to play, a season that long and know how well Joel plays the puck, and to dump it in one or two times before, and he takes an opportunity at it, he misses the first two times, he's not going to miss it the third time. So I think it was more shock of that they kept dumping it into him than the actual goal happening, because his puck skills are uncanny for a big guy like that. It's outstanding. He's like having an extra defenseman on the ice.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna get into the fun stuff. I'm gonna get into kind of, you were there in 2019, not you.
Yes.
You were with the minor league organization.
Yeah.
So my first question, and I'll come back to my second question depending on what Dustin asked. What was your feeling like when they finally won that cup in 19?
Yeah, that was exciting. I was watching it actually back in my hometown in Sudbury. At the same time, the Raptors were on a little bit of a heater, and they won the championship then too. So there was a lot of good things going on, not only in Canada but in Sudbury with me and my friends watching the Blues, and how well they played. And we had some players that were with us in San Antonio that were up there. Playing, obviously Binner being one of them. We had Binner for half the year up till January until they made the change in net. And I've known Binner since junior. I coached him in Owen Sound. So I think when you see players like that they reach that pinnacle in sports, there's a lot of pride, that goes into it, especially for a player like Binner and what I know he went through to get to that point in his career, and how well he played and what a big part he was in them winning that championship.
Yeah, that was I remembered. I actually live streamed the game, me watching the game.
Yeah.
That was the first year of my show, was the 18-19 season. Was the first year, and I live streamed it. I'm going to pass this over to Justin, and I hope he doesn't steal my question for me. But go ahead, Justin.
Well, I'm just going to follow up with a little quirk here. So I'm pretty sure you're not tired. Anytime you hear the Play Glorious song, you're always up and dancing, right, Drew?
Yeah,
I hope.
Yeah, of course. We don't get to see many Blues games in Canada. They don't broadcast here nationally quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
We just typically it's Toronto or Montreal or Edmonton. That's kind of the prime time we see here.
Well, I'm going to talk about some players on the Blues here soon, but I kind of want to circle back. I don't mean to go back to the Springfield Thunderbirds era, even though we're still kind of there. I should have followed this up with my first question. Was there a player out of the multiple individuals that you had the pleasure of coaching down there that you just were really enamored by, that you were immersed by, that you were like, man, that guy is going to be something special down there when you were coaching for the Springfield Thunderbirds, whether or not they're in the Blues organization currently or if they're elsewhere?
Depends. Like so there's a couple things like that stand out to me when you ask me that question. So, and I can answer it in two parts. So one, the one person I'll talk about is Tommy Cross, who is our captain there. And the thing that really, he immersed me, he was such an outstanding human being. And a great captain, probably the best captain I've ever had or I've ever seen. And what he did for our younger players at that time and bringing their development. And he was a big part of our run to the Calder Cup that year. But like he was somebody that I was just, I had so much respect for him with how, he captained his players and how he treated his players, but how he kind of integrated himself with the organization and the fans. He was somebody that really stood out to me that I really, really appreciate. And I appreciate Tommy and I have a good relationship. We still keep in touch. He's working on the player development side in Columbus right now, and I could see a path from him either coaching or somewhere on the management side. But an extremely smart hockey person, but just an outstanding human being. You know, that's something that really stuck out to me in my time in Springfield was him and his leadership qualities. You know, player wise, you know, you look at a guy like Nathan Walker, and we brought him in, and he was somebody that I heavily scouted. I know going into year 2, we wanted to make a lot of changes to how we wanted to play the game, comparable to the first year I came in. I thought we lacked pace in our game. I thought we were big, but we were big and slow. We wanted to still have a highly competitive team, and Nathan really stuck out to me when we watched him in the American League, and he was somebody that we targeted. And I think, you know, the Blues fans, you know, what you've seen from Nathan Walker is why we wanted him in our organization, and we were able to sign him from Washington on a pretty friendly contract to come and play in the American League. And he was one of the players that really, you know, drove our team in that team. And unfortunately, we lost him because he was playing so well, and he went up to St. Louis, and we didn't see him after and he was a big part of that team. But it also gave, you know, players like Dakota Joshua and Alexei Torpachenko, he gave them the opportunity to play higher up in our lineup and develop and play critical minutes. But, you know, again, like, Nathan's such a great kid and a great human being and a great person. He brings such a, you know, a ton of energy to the team. And, you know, you can see he continues to, you know, find a way to stay in the game at the NHL level for being an undersized guy.
Yeah.
And that.
Go ahead, Justin. I'm sorry.
No, I just was saying that's huge, because the two guys that you just mentioned, you know, Alexei Torpachenko and Nathan Walker, those guys are energy guys for the St. Louis Blues. They're like on our energy line. They're the fourth line guys, but they're guys that grit it out every step of the way, every whistle, every shift. So I mean, it's great to hear that you know, someone of your caliber have that type of approach, because, you know, we're big Nathan Walker guys, big Torpachenko guy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they're great kids too. They're great kids. Like Torpo's great.
Sorry. I didn't mean to walk over you there, Drew. I'm going to go back to a fan question. I'm not going to post the question because he worded it weird, but Aaron Nell said, which player did you coach possibly had the best work ethic? And I think you just answered that question, but I want to make sure.
Yeah. I think Nathan's up there with how he worked on a continuous day. You know, he had pro habits, NHL habits at the American League level. And I think we had quite a few guys, like, I don't want to just not say one or two guys, but Nathan's a guy that kind of, I think because he's undersized and, you know, coming from Australia and going to England, and I think he went maybe to Czech Republic and kind of worked his way over into the US and the USHL. You know, like you have, you know, here's a guy, like, you just talk about character, like the will to find ways to just keep himself in the game. And the only way you do that is showing up and being a pro every day, whether it's on the ice or off the ice, being a good human being. But just like the will and the drive just to stay in the fight all the time. And I think he was one that, when for coaches, you look for players that can kind of drive your practices. And he was a player that stuck out to that. And he'd always drive our practice and motivate other players to kind of get to his level, you know, whether they could or not, they would try to, you know, and that's something, you know, when you have that, you know, whether it's at the junior or American League level or NHL level, that you have something special going on, and it really pushes your team to better heights.
Yeah, I can see that. I love Nathan Walker. I want to get into what happened 2 years ago. You're coaching for Thunderbirds, and I'm guessing coaching the AHL, that your dream or your next step is to get that NHL job, right? So what is your thought process, or what's going through your head when that season, the Blues are having such a bad season, and then all of a sudden, you know, go through that process? What happens, or how did that work that you ended up, you know, one day coaching, the next thing you know, you're coaching the Blues against the New York Rangers?
I mean, I wasn't immune to what the results were in St. Louis, but to be honest with you, I was immersed with our team and where we were, and at the time we were actually the day I left, I really felt, I think we were playing that day in Springfield, before I got the call that the night before from Doug, but when we left the ice practice that day, I felt so good about our team that and we'd been playing pretty well up to that point, but I knew we had kind of turned a corner, and I knew we were ready to take off. But as a head coach in the American League, and as a coach, there's always a process you go through. There's never a perfect plan. I think for my plan, when I started, obviously I started as an assistant coach in junior hockey. The next step is, a head coach in major junior, which I made, and then a head coach in the American League. I think, the perfect instance would be if, you go to as an assistant coach, you learn the game a little bit, but different things happen and you have opportunities, and certainly you're not going to want to turn those down. And I'd been in the organization for 6 years, 6 years and a bit at that time. I'd been around a lot of those guys that were in St. Louis. I developed a lot of the younger players that were in St. Louis at the time. So I had relationships with those players, previously, which made it easier for me. I think if I was going to another team from Springfield to LA or Chicago, I think that would be a real difficult challenge for a younger coach to come in and do that. But I think with the relationships that I had, being around the organization, knowing Doug, knowing the other people, knowing the other assistant coaches that were on the staff, it made that jump a little bit easier. But it is difficult. Like, it's a big jump from the American Hockey League to the NHL, as a head coach to a head coach. But those are the things that you don't map out in your career. Things are presented in front of you and you have a decision to make. And, I think I made the right decision. At the end of the day, it didn't last as long as I would want, but I would never turn that opportunity down. And I think, again, the St. Louis Blues organization, Doug, the rest of the people that I work for, I'm very thankful for the opportunity that they gave me to coach their hockey team.
That took the breath words. I mean, took my breath away. Justin, your turn. Then I'll get to a fan question, and then I'll go.
So I actually want to kind of start getting into a little bit of a deeper question. It's not extremely deep, but I want to talk about a current player for the St. Louis Blues now, but yeah. You also had the pleasure of coaching, and we talked about him a little bit. The fan offered something about this player in the chat for the question, but Joel Hofer. There's been a lot of talk about Joel Hofer, obviously becoming more of the starter here in St. Louis. Obviously, I know that you alluded to both Binnington and Hofer being great puck handlers at the NHL level. But what's your thought process on Hofer? If you've been paying attention to a lot of St. Louis games, I know you said that you don't really get them in Canada, but for your time seeing Hofer, how he's developed, how he's played for the St. Louis Blues, what's your thoughts on Joe Hofer? Is he ready to make that next step?
Yeah, I think, with Joel, like I've had a lot of belief, and as a young goalie with us in the American Hockey League, he made a lot of good strides, certainly very quickly, I thought. But, when you have the size, the ability for a goalie that size to be able to get out to pucks, he's gotten stronger, which was probably something that he needed to work on to be able to get, post to post a little bit quicker. And you're seeing that with his strength. That's just maturity with a goalie, and him being so young. And I just think you're seeing a goalie that's starting to mature. I don't think there was ever a doubt when he left us in Springfield that I didn't think one day that he would be a starter in the NHL, whether it was with St. Louis or somewhere else. I just think the ability and the size, and, the character of the person, those things go a long way, and, St. Louis has two very capable number ones, and that's a good problem to have. I know it can be difficult on both players, but both players are very mature, And I think Joel's learned a lot from Binner. I think there's a lot to be said about having somebody like Jordan Binnington around your dressing room. Again, here's a person that really had to grind his way to get to St. Louis, and there was a lot of valleys before he hit the peaks, and that says a lot about Jordan. And then, I don't think he's never been a person that's taken that for granted. I know him personally. I know he loves playing in St. Louis. He loves the fan base there, and he's very, very good to the people that he tends to net with. And I think Joel's development has a big part of Binner being there. I don't think you have that in every organization, and I think that's just a process of the game. And whatever happens past that is out of the players' hands. It's certainly out of the coaches' hands and the management's hands, but they'll know when it's time. They're all very capable and smart people that are working at that level. But both goalies are outstanding people, and they've proven to be very good goalies.
We had a question from Ashley Jones, and I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit because she made it particular one player, but I'm opening up. What was the difference between coaching the players that you coach at the AHL level against when you coached them at the Blues, or was there a difference when you coached them at the two different levels?
I didn't find a difference at all. No. And I think that just goes to probably the relationships that I had with them at the American Hockey League level, though those relationships didn't change. And I think, honesty was always the best policy when you're with the players. And I think it was no different than when you go to the NHL level. When you're dealing with maybe more veteran players, those conversations, they happen more often than they do with the younger players. I think they're more straightforward, but for me, like the players, they know when you're bullshitting. Like they just want honesty. That's all. And then they want a path out of it. So they want to know what they can do to get out of the basement. And so when you're talking to these players, one, they want you to be honest, but they also want to have a plan to where they want to get back to, or where they have to get back to get into the lineup, if that's what you're talking about.
No, great answer. Now, on that, I'm going to ask possibly a question you may not answer, but I'm going to specifically point at a player, because right now in the Blues culture, this player is probably the most polarizing, and that's going to be, I'm sure you can guess, Jordan Kyrou.
Okay.
What is your, and as best as you can answer this question, a lot of people think he's a lazy player. There's a lot of negativity. What is your impression of Jordan Kyrou, and do you think that he needs a new place? Do you think that St. Louis is the right place for him? Does he need to go somewhere else? In your opinion, and I know that you're not connected to the Blues anymore, so I'm asking your hopefully unvarnished opinion on that.
Well, I'd say be careful what you wish for. I mean, the Toronto Maple Leafs, there's a guy, Mitch Marner, that just, was probably two games away from being, a Stanley Cup champion, and, he got chased out of town. I love Jordan Kyrou. And when I first went there, he went through a hard time. We spent a lot of time together, and he played very well for me, and I had him in the American League. I coached against him in junior. It's hard to score goals in the NHL, and he's somebody that can score. He continuously scores 30 goals, and it's hard to get that. But I sometimes it is good for a player to get a new start. But I caution, he's an NHL player, and he's an elite NHL player, and scoring goals is not easy, and that's one thing he can do. And I like Jordan. He's a quiet kid. He kind of keeps to himself. I think some of that emotion comes off. I don't think he intends to, insult anybody, but it's just his personality. He's just a quiet person, and kind of wants to be by himself and do his thing. And, there are times where you can be frustrated. And I think the frustration comes because we know how good Jordan can be. And I think he struggles with his consistency sometimes. And I think if you saw a consistent hockey player, you wouldn't be talking about Jordan wanting to move somewhere else, or you'd want him on your team every night.
Well, let me make sure I do add this. I am absolutely a Jordan Kyrou fan. I get called a Jordan Kyrou apologist all the time. But in the interest of being who we are, I got to ask the question. So that's why that question came.
No, that's fair. No, that's fair. And
so,
like I said, like I have a ton of respect for Jordan, and the one thing as a coach, like coming by goals is not easy. So when you have a player like that, as long as they fit within your team structure and what you want to do and getting them to buy into it, then you don't want to give up on them.
So I kind of want to piggyback off of this with the whole Jordan Kyrou thing. So not just Jordan Kyrou, but many players, obviously, like you said, Drew, I 100% agree. The grass is always not greener on the other side. Like you mentioned with Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner got chased out. He's been very good for Vegas. You don't want to see something like that happen, especially Blues fans don't want to see that happen with Jordan Kyrou. If that was the case and he went elsewhere, I would be ecstatic for him. I'd wish him well. My thing with Jordan Kyrou is I think the way that fans view players, I feel like most people don't understand the grasp and the gravity of how GMs, coaches, and stuff view certain players. I think they have a different level of value to other teammates, coaches, GMs, rather than the fans. Can that be true?
Yeah, I think when you look, you got to step back. Say, okay, I'm going to get rid of Jordan Kyrou. Well, how are you going to replace him? Here's a guy that you picked, okay, as a second round pick, all right, and you've developed him, you spent the time with him, and he's now a 30 goal scorer in the NHL. What's a 30 goal scorer in the NHL cost you? Prospects and at least 2 first round picks. So you're giving up. I don't know, just throw it out there. Like, who are you giving up? Your top 2 prospects, and you want to give up your next, 2 of your through picks this year to get, bring a Jordan Kyrou in. That's the reality of the game right now. Like you see at the trade deadline, teams are giving up a prospect and a first round pick for a 6th defenseman. Like, like that.
Absolutely.
That's the going rate now. So you move on Jordan Kyrou. How are you going to replace that?
Mm-hmm.
Unless
Jordan Kyrou
you have it coming up.
Drew, are you swimming around in my brain? Because actually what I said on this show, how many times have I said he's worth 4 first-round picks? And I think he's worth 4 first-round picks.
Just follow the NHL trade deadline, and you watch players that get picked up, and you're kind of amazed. And a lot of those players might have been like mid to late first picks in their draft, and now all of a sudden they're getting traded for first round picks and prospects. So it's what how do you replace that? If you can replace it internally, and St. Louis has done a great job drafting, and I think they have, like I said before, I think they have a lot of players that are kind of pushing out the door, but they have guys that are going to come in and step in and score 30 goals right now. There's an argument that if you do, then maybe you can, and maybe you can make your team better. But I would caution to that too. And there's always a cost at doing business. There isn't hockey trades anymore. It's really tough for teams and managements to do hockey trades 1-for-1, and it doesn't happen anymore. You really have to dig into your draft picks and prospects to make a trade.
Yeah, I feel like for some fans, how it works for them is they look at a guy and they're like, okay, I want this. They kind of think it's like playing like the NHL video game on easy mode, like trading. Like, oh, I'll trade this 4th line guy for this 1st line star. I mean, you have to be realistic with what your asking price is. You have to be realistic on where you're wanting things to go for your organization. And like you said, Drew, replacing a proven 70-point guy in Jordan Kyrou is a lot harder than you think. I mean, I think that's pretty fair to have that assessment.
And what's a 70-point guy in the market now with the cap going up going to cost you? He's not going to cost you $8 million. He's going to cost you 12 or 13.
Yeah,
that's just the reality.
Well,
great. And players have a lot of power now. You see, Dylan Larkin asking for a trade, or Darnell Nurse, and they're saying I'll only go to 3 teams. So when that happens too, it puts management under a lot of stress. It's tough to make hockey trades when those things are happening, when players, and rightfully so, they're given those things. And I was a player too, and I think the game has come a long way, but now the players tend to have some say in where they're moved now these days.
I want to, a great answer, by the way. I want to kind of ask something a little different. As a coach, and the way you've coached in the social media age, and social media has definitely changed how fans think and act and let their pleasure, displeasure be heard. How do you handle that as a coach in the locker room at the different levels? Because I'm sure it's much different than it in St. Louis than it was in either Springfield or San Antonio.
Yeah, to be honest, you cannot control what's happening out there, and you can't really monitor what your players are doing on their phones or what. I would hope that they tend to turn their phones off during the year or block their accounts. But I think it's only human nature to go on, and whether you have a great game, you want to hear what people are saying about you, and if you have a bad game, you tend to not want to go on it, but you might peek at it. And for me, I'm in that social media, but I'm kind of I've grown up with it. Not as much as my kids have, and they're more adapt to being on social media than maybe I am. But I think I have a tendency, for me, when I look at it, especially when I went to St. Louis, is to make a positive, not a positive, but I tried to stay off it as much as I could and not interact and not read too much, and kind of stay away from it and just kind of stay in the now with myself and what I had to do with my players and my team and my coaching staff. I don't think everybody can say that, but but I think it's tough for players. Like, I think it can be very tough for players. And I listened to Mitch Marner's interview today about the mental health and some of the he was really some of the things that he went through in Toronto, and it's real for these players. It really is, and it's tough.
Right, Justin.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think these athletes, what we got to remember is they're human. Yes, they're fantastic, talented individuals, but they are human at the end of the day. So I think that's something that gets lost in translation, especially in the social media ages. But I actually kind of wanted to circle back. I know you mentioned something, and I don't want to get like personal or anything like that, but you seem like a great family man. You talked about spending family time a lot. I want to ask a little bit about your influence for your kids. Are your kids taking any form of a approach on being sportsy or trying to go into something like the path that you did?
Yeah, so I have three girls. I have a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old, and 11-year-old, and they're all athletes. I spent the day at the track here with my two youngest that were in track and field today. They all play hockey. They play for the Queens program here. Actually, my 16-year-old is going to go play in the U22 Elite League in Ontario. She's going to leave to go to play in Kingston, which is quite a young age for her. But she's going to, typically they go at about 17. She's going to go a year earlier. They invited her and she made the team. Similar to kind of junior high. So it's kind of junior hockey for girls. So a lot of the girls already are committed to D1 colleges that are in that league. My daughter's just, I think as of 2 days ago, teams are allowed to just start talking to them now, right? So she just, I think, yeah, I'm not sure the exact date, but because she's 16, they're allowed to talk to her after a certain date, which I think just passed. But she's still 2 years away from graduating from high school. All my girls are in French immersion. I don't speak a lick of French. So, when they want to talk smack to me, it's usually in French. But all extremely intelligent females. They get it all from their mother. They get a little bit of the sports side from me. I was a good athlete when I was growing up. I played all different kinds of sports. I see in today's game, typically hockey players just play hockey, and they're not as good as athletes as I find when we were growing up. And I see that at the junior hockey level working with players, but they're outstanding hockey players because they spend a lot of time on skill development in the off season where, I was golfing, I was playing baseball, I was out fishing, I was doing, other things, playing soccer. In high school, I was in track and field up until I went to the Sioux. I played volleyball. I played on the basketball team in high school. I did all those things, and not a lot of hockey players at the junior and college level aren't doing that anymore when they're growing up. They're just kind of, just doing one thing. But yeah, my girls they love hockey. My wife, she played NCAA at Northeastern in Boston. She's a high school teacher now, but she coaches the younger kids here. She's coaching my younger daughter. She's coached all of our kids. So they have a good coach in their mother.
That's fantastic.
First of all, let me say this. My daughters do it to me in Japanese.
Yeah.
So I get that point. And if we can get hooked up, let's go fishing together.
There you go. I'm a big fisher. Yeah, I can't wait. I'll be down. I've got 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks, and my kids are out of school up here, and then we'll be heading to our cottage for the month of July, and I'll be out doing some salmon fishing there for a bit.
Fly fishing?
No, we downrig on the big lake. So I'm on Lake Huron, so we got to get deep. We got to get to 80 to 100 feet. Flies won't work for us.
Nope.
No.
It would be fun. It would be an absolute pleasure if we could make that happen sometime. I want to get into a kind of a deep question now. I want to get into when you came to the Blues, when you coached them up until you were released, and as best as you can, what's going on in that locker room? We have heard, as been put out, there's issues in the locker room. There's issues in the locker room. Is there issues in the locker room, or the things that you can talk about, not talk about? Can you help us understand what's going on with that team right now?
Yeah, and again, I never heard that. Again, I said, I don't know where those issues in the locker rooms would be coming from. I never heard that in my tenure when I was there. I thought we had good leadership. I thought we had young leadership. I thought, Schenner was still finding his way as a captain. Even though he'd been in the league for a long time, he was a young captain, and that's something that takes time. I really enjoyed working with Schenner. I think Colton Pranko is just he's one of the best human beings I've met in my life too, just as a person. I think there's a lot of good leadership in that locker room. I'd find it hard to believe that any of those rumors were coming from anybody within the organization. I think when things are not as good as you'd like it to be, there's always going to be questions around certain individuals or leadership at times. Collectively as a group, I really liked the group, and I think after I left, there was there was an uptick, and then they really took off, and I think it was late February when then they went on that run, and I think that says a lot about that team and what they could do. Obviously, they took a little bit of a step back last year, but they weren't far off it, and I think it's a team it's close to being, I don't want to say a contender, but I think they're a team that's very close to being, an everyday playoff team. And then it's from there, you see how Carolina, it took them 9 years to get to where they were. And it's not an easy trophy to win. And obviously the people in St. Louis and the fan base understand that with what they went through and how long it took them to get to where they were until 2019. And it takes time to rebuild after that. Not to say that it was a rebuild, but there's been a lot of changes within that organization and the leadership group. And it takes time to build it back up. It takes time to bring your prospects up. And I think they've done a real good job in drafting. And like I said, I think they have a really good prospect pool there. And I think they have a lot of young guys that are going to be, if they're not in the NHL next year, they're probably close to being in it. But then it's going through the ups and downs with those young players and having them play in important games and in critical moments of the games and learning how to win in those situations. And usually it's by losing in those situations is when you learn. And so there's still probably going to be a little bit of a time before the Blues get to that point, but I think they have a really good foundation there. There's a lot of excellent hockey players in that hockey room, and there's a lot of good human beings there too.
I do hope you didn't think that question was out of bounds. I will say that.
No, that's fine. And like I said, I didn't pay too much attention to outside noise, so I wouldn't, not that I would say that that's the first time I've ever heard that, but it's the first time I've never heard it within the dressing room or around my players. And, I always felt that we had a good group in there.
Fair point.
I never thought that there was that much of an issue ever in the locker room, between certain guys. But I kind of wanted to, because we're talking about leadership. Obviously, no one knows. Obviously the guys that are there now, Armstrong, Steen, Montgomery. Those are the guys that are gonna know like what they want to go forward with the leadership. For the captaincy and all that. So as we know, Braden Shin was offloaded to the Islanders. So the Blues currently do not have a captain. We've had a discussion on this show. I'm a big Robert Thomas guy. I think Robert Thomas is the next St. Louis Blues captain. I know you said that you don't have ties with St. Louis anymore. You don't get to watch the games as much. But is there a particular individual that you think may get the captaincy for the St. Louis Blues eventually?
I don't know. I will say this. I think like Doug and Steiner and Monty, they'll go through the process, and and I'm sure they are going through the process, but they're not going to be rushed into the process. I think it's going to be an important piece to their organization moving forward. They're going to want to make sure they get it right. You know what? And it may not be at the beginning of the year. They might wait. Who knows? I don't know the timing on it, but I know they have a lot of good people. And Robbie Thomas is an outstanding. Obviously, him as a hockey player and what he does on the ice. He's an elite hockey player. He's got a ton of respect throughout the league and a ton of respect in that room. I think there's a lot of guys, like Jakey Neighbors is a young guy too that sticks out to me. I love coaching Jakey. Jakey's such a great, again, well-spoken young man, plays with his heart on his sleeve. Like he's an outstanding human being, plays the game the right way. But there's a lot of players that do that. And I don't think it comes down to one individual person. I think when you collectively look at Stanley Cup teams, you'll have a captain, but you have a lot of good support and leadership within that group. And I think it goes to more than just one person that's wearing the C.
Great answer. Now we're going to go to Samantha's got a question, to a fan question. Do you think the Thunderbirds can make another Calder Cup run with Steve Ott as head coach?
Yeah, I think Otter's a great pick for them. When he went down there, I knew they were going to turn that team around. I thought that they were kind of underperforming at the time. Like I said, I think they have a lot of good young players down there. I knew some of the veterans that were in that lineup. I thought they had real good leadership within their group. I think the goaltending at the time he got there it kind of been up and down a little bit. They seemed to get it on track there while he went there. But certainly, Otter and his background as an assistant coach in the NHL and his playing background, he'll command respect in that dressing room. Certainly what he's done in the few months that he was there and getting them back into the playoffs and then having the run that they did, and that's attractive also to bringing in good players, older players. When you're looking at your veterans, you want to make sure that you surround those younger players. And that's something that I thought our management did really well while I was there, especially when we were in Springfield, bringing in older players to kind of insulate those younger players, to allow them to kind of make mistakes, but learn and continue to play, and start to play in those critical moments. And that's a big part of the development of these players getting to the NHL, is being able to play in the Calder Cup playoffs and playing those critical moments, and being on the ice when you're down a goal or up a goal. That's such a huge part of development at the American Hockey League. And depending on how those young players come to camp, you don't know, how the roster is going to play out in St. Louis, but certainly there's going to be some young players that are pushing for spots like they always do early on in the season. But if they went status quo and, continue to come back with some of the veterans or improved in some of the positions, they're certainly going to have a good hockey team there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that the Blues have a very, very good scouting staff. Like their minor league system is really well. I want to go to another fan question. This is a bit of a hard hitting one, but I think it's a good one to ask. This deals with when you got let go. It says a hard hitting question, but did you know when Montgomery was fired from Boston that it was probably over here in St. Louis for you, or were you given any hints, or what was the process, or what?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, I didn't have any. And to be honest with you, when Monty got fired, I texted him, and I just reached out to him, and like most coaches do after someone gets fired, and just hey, keep your heads up, and you'll find a job soon. I didn't think it was going to be mine, but that's just the way it happens, and it's a funny game how things. But there was an article written, I think, in the Athletic by Jeremy Rutherford that came out that I didn't know anything about, that got sent to me via some of my family members, which I didn't appreciate much, but it is what it is. He's got a job to do. And, I had a relationship with them that I thought, maybe he might give me a heads up a little bit. So it was a little bit disappointing on that end for him. Just that I had to find out from family members instead of him just giving me a quick heads up. Hey, I'm doing this kind of thing. But, when you asked me that, did I see the writing on the wall? No, I didn't. Were we playing well at that time? No, we weren't, but we, gone through a long stretch of very critical injuries. I didn't have Robbie Thomas for 8 weeks. I didn't have Nick Leddy. Krug hadn't been in my lineup. Sonny wasn't in my lineup. I had a couple other guys that were in and out. We had quite a few injuries at that time, and we were, just under 500 at the time. There were teams that were, 10 games under 500, and none of those guys lost their jobs. So I wasn't, I wasn't expecting it, but when it happened and when I spoke to Doug, and again, Doug was, extremely professional about it. And, when you go through that process, which I had never been through, obviously it's kind of a shock, but I thought, Doug was, the human side comes out in Doug. And I know a lot of people don't see the human side of Doug, and I respect him a lot, and he's got a job to do. He has hire people to answer to. And if he feels he has to make a change that's better for the organization, then who am I to say any different?
Oh, I thank you for answering that. My question now. Okay, you want to go, Justin?
I just wanted to bring up, because I think it was a fantastic answer, because I talk about players being human and all that, and I think that yes, it does hurt you in the end when you see something like that happen and you don't get that, that maybe the heads up that you were hoping for or anything like that. But then you talk about how you still talk to Doug to this day. You have mutual respect with Doug. You really still like Doug, and you talk to Doug. So I think it's great to see that people understand that it is a business. You do what you have to do to try and turn things around for your organization and team. And I think at the end of the day, although it hurts you, I think the answer that you gave was spot on for how, coaches, players, and GMs feel when, those hard decisions are made.
Yeah. And I think as a coach, and I can tell you this, like I had a lot of positive calls from coaches and friends. And then you have, coaches or friends, where it's like, screw them kind of thing, like the negative side, which you don't need as a coach or a player for that matter. Like I think the one thing I learned about it is, and I think I talked about it a little bit, you kind of want to take a step back and evaluate. And I think the easiest thing to do is be bitter and not really, try and blame or point fingers at anybody else. That's just, but that's never been me. I think that it's certainly not going to make yourself a better person or a better coach. You have to evaluate yourself, go through that process, which I did. And certainly there's always things that when you go through that process that you look back on it and you're like, geez, I had to be better in those situations. And there were certainly those situations when I was in St. Louis, and not that those were the situations where, ultimately I lost my job, but at the end of the day, you have to evaluate yourself as a coach and a human being, and trying to take, the right steps forward to become better.
Great. Again, I love your answers there. You're not giving us the canned coaching answers, and I appreciate that. I really do. So I want to get into, since you've been so open and honest, I want to talk about this a little bit. Yeah. When you first got there, Alexander Steen was, I think he had just gotten announced as the assistant GM, and you got to see. Was it right, or was
No,
was
that was it. It would have been in the summer. It would have been in the
okay?
summer. Yeah, that would have been in the summer right before they extended me.
Okay.
That Steiner was coming on. Yeah, so that it probably would have been a couple of weeks before we finalized things with myself and Doug and the team.
Okay. So my question is kind of what you saw of Steiner when he was there, and him with being the GM, and what kind of is Doug going to back away and give him the reins, or is Doug going to still be in there? What do you think?
I think that's a question for Doug,
right.
not for me. As far as I know, Doug's going to be the president of hockey operations, and Steiner is going to be the general manager. And I've listened to Doug's comments. I think he's going to run the team until the draft, and then once the draft is over, then. And I get that's just I believe that's what I heard from Doug. And then once the draft is over, then he'll step back and Steiner will take over the GM role. I think the plan was in place, 2 years ago that Steiner would learn under Doug. And I think the fans in St. Louis know Steiner well enough, and what you see is what you get. Like, as a player, that's the kind of person he is what you're going to have as a general manager. He's a very thoughtful, very intelligent person, knows the game very well. He obviously hasn't been out of the game very long. So he has, a good evaluation of the league, the players that are still in the league, but, what better person to learn under than Doug Armstrong for the last 2 years too. I think that's going to go a long way in Steiner's, development himself and taking over the team when he does.
Justin, I think we'll go 2 more questions each, and then we'll let Drew go. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that'll work. I kind of wanted to talk. I know we kind of been all over the place here, but I know you talked about how the Blues had a good prospect pool. There is a specific player that I kind of want to get your thoughts on. I don't know if you've got to, personally meet this individual or have any prior coaching experience with this player or maybe against them, but I want to talk about Jimmy Snuggerud and what you find so great about a guy like Jimmy Snuggerud, who played his first, his rookie season this year, did get some games in last year, played in the playoffs a little bit for the Blues. But what's your thoughts on Jimmy Snuggerud? What's his ceiling looking like?
Yeah, so I saw Jimmy for 2 years at development camp. I think it was 2 years before he came on. Obviously, I didn't get to see him play at college at all, live, I should say. Certainly seen games on video, but watching on a computer and watching live is totally different. You get a different feel for the game when you're live, and it's easier to see how the players interact, whether it's on the bench or on the ice. You can watch their body language, stuff like that. But I feel in what I saw from Jimmy is he's an electric hockey player, and he's got an outstanding release. At a young age to have that release where he can get it off, and he's a dangerous. And again, here, I'm going back to the Jordan Kyrou. Like, it's hard to find guys that can score goals. And again, the St. Louis Blues have drafted a kid, albeit in the first round, but later in the first round, they find a player that his goal scoring and what he did at the US MVP when he was drafted through to college. And now it's transferring almost automatically to the NHL, and the way he can score goals and beat goalies with his shot and his release, and how he gets it off. And it's, you look at some of these young players and how they release the puck or how they hide the puck from the release. You look at a young player like Bedard and how he's able to pull it into his feet, and fool goalies. They can't pick it up. It's really amazing how these young players now, how different ways they shoot the puck, and they can get it off so quick, but they can get it off in really uncomfortable positions where goalies can't see the release, or they don't think the player can get the puck off as quickly as they can. And he's one player that seems to have, as we would call it, he's got a big wheelhouse, and he seems to be able to get his body in his hands and get pucks on net. And that's one thing, with him, he seems to hit the net a lot, and that's something to say. Like, if you can hit the net, usually eventually they're going to go in. And today it's tough to beat goalies, but if you can get it on net and get it on net quick. If there's traffic, obviously a lot of clear sight shots are going to be stopped. It's hard to beat the goalies unless they make a mistake. It has to be an outstanding shot, and there's not too many players in the league right now that can beat goalies when it's clean. It's usually the goalie makes a mistake, or it's just an outstanding shot that the goalie is not going to make the save.
Yeah, he's got a great release. His release is something spectacular. I've never seen anything like it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Oh, well, great battle, Drew. This is an amazing interview. I really appreciate you. I'm going to go to a lighter question now, if you don't mind. You talked about this a little bit. You talked about Kelly Chase, and I want to bring up the St. Louis Blues alumni. Yeah. I myself, and you may know this, I'm a member of the Blues Warriors.
There you go.
Right? Can you talk a little bit about the Blues alumni and how important they are to the organization? And are they one of the best alumni organizations out there?
I mean, obviously I can only speak for St. Louis, but I would have a hard time thinking that there is a better alumni than what they do, and how the organization from top to bottom with Tom Stillman and Doug, and how they treat their ex-players there. It's second to none. And we've had them in, we have lunches with them. They come into the practice rink, and we have a barbecue, and we sit down and have beers. It's amazing how far that goes with your players that are in the game now, being able to sit down and talk to these players that had previously played for the St. Louis, and what they've gone through and where they're at in their careers and after their careers. And I think they do such an outstanding, and it goes to show you, not only about the city of St. Louis, but the fans of St. Louis, how many of the players actually stay in St. Louis after they retire, or come back even after they've played somewhere else, to come back and live in the area, to be a part of the Blues family. And, how the St. Louis Blues organization and the fans treat their alumni. It's just, to me, I don't think anybody does it any better. And if you aren't trying to do it as good as St. Louis, it's a shame, because, I think it's just something that's very special for the players that are wearing the jersey right now. But I know it's very appreciated by the players that have played there in the past, that are being taken in by the fans and the organization still.
Does that extend to ex-coaches too?
I don't know. I haven't seen any of them around.
Well, I meant you.
Yeah. No, I didn't see any of them around when I was there.
Oh, okay.
I just saw a lot of the players, but no, I think, I've played for, 4 or 5 different organizations, and, I get emails, but, about coming to certain things, but I don't think it's to the extent of what St. Louis and how that organization treats their ex-players. They go above and beyond.
Oh, thank you. And by the way, your practice facility, I grew up 1.5 miles from there.
Oh, okay. The new one or the old one?
Huh? The one in Maryland Heights.
Okay, so are you saying you grew up at the casino, or
no? I grew up where that arena is, or where that is now. I used to fish. River used to run there, and the Army Corps of Engineer, when they built all that, set that levee up. Yeah. I used to go fishing there as a kid. I lived by Pattonville High School, which is like a mile from where you are. I lived a mile from there, so I grew up in that area.
What a great spot they did. That's such a great spot, a great area for the players to come, and they spend such a large amount of time at the rink and at the practice rink, to have something built like that, for them to come into, and be able to be in a dressing room and a facility like that it's a great facility for them to come and be a part of every day.
Thank you. Justin, last question for each one.
Yeah,
You go.
go ahead, guy. I want you to ask, and then I'll ask my question.
Oh, I hadn't come up with it yet. So I guess my last question is going to be this. Is there any, if you could, in hindsight's 2020, is there anything that happened in your time with St. Louis? If you could do something differently, what would it be? And, you know, is there anybody that you really, really miss being connected with while you were here? Kind of a double question.
Yeah. Well, I think just the connection with the players. I think when you're in it with them, like it's, you know, I know as a fan, you're on the outside, but when you're on the inside with the players and, you know, the camaraderie between the players, you know, like it's something that it's hard to really kind of spell out to the average fan or the fan that's buying the tickets and watching the games, and what really goes behind the scenes with coaches and players, you know, on the day to day and our travels and stuff. I think that's probably, you know, that's what you miss always as a player, and you miss it as a coach, is being around the players and around the coaching staff, and the ups and the downs and the laughs and the funny stuff that happens, you know, during the year. There's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on in games that never, you know, behind the scenes that never get talked about, that, you know, are in books 20 years down the road that players and coaches write. But you know, a lot of good stories there. You know, as for, you know, things, there is things I don't really want to, you know, talk about it, but you know, things that are, you know, that I've thought about again on reflection of myself and becoming a better coach, that, you know, certain mistakes that I made, that whether it was in game or how I handled things away, you know, off the ice, behind the scenes, that I would do better. And, you know, that's just part of you know, development and getting better as a coach. I think you're constantly trying to evaluate yourself and get better. It doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you're at the minor hockey level, the junior level, the college level, minor pro or pro or NHL. These coaches are always trying to get better. They're making mistakes. We're human beings as well as the players are, and you're just trying to learn from them and move forward.
Great answer. Great answer. Go ahead, Justin.
So I think the best way to tie this all up into a nice bow, you had such a great story, such a great lengthy playing career and a coaching career as well. I guess my final question would be are you still hoping, if you get the chance to go and coach again at the NHL level or the AHL level, would you take that opportunity if the time is right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I've had some opportunities that came up that I wasn't ready for it, or it wasn't the right fit for me. And I've been going through the process with some interviews. Like I said, you know, now it's the interview time. Sometimes you have to take a step backwards to go forwards. And I think in my situation, that's probably what I'm going to have to do. And a lot of people have to do that in life, not necessarily hockey coaches. People in all different kinds of jobs have to sometimes go backwards to move forwards. And I think that's going to be the process that I'm going through here, whether it's, you know, the American League, and then again, continue to work on your craft and get better each day and get yourself back to the National Hockey League, where every young boy wants to be, whether you're a player or you're a grown man trying to get to that level and be a coach.
Well, Drew, I have to say this. I've been doing this for 8 years. I've interviewed a lot of people. This is one of my most favorite interviews. I have absolutely, completely enjoyed having you on the show. And I hope you become a friend of the show and that we can talk to you more. And I just want to thank you for joining us tonight.
Anytime. No, I appreciate it. And I appreciated the questions from everybody and your fans, and continued success for you guys, and certainly the Blues organization. And hopefully you guys have a lot to cheer about and talk about on the positive side this coming season with the hockey club.
I hope so. Justin, you're about ready. You last thoughts before we close this out tonight?
Absolutely. Like I said, Drew, in the beginning, it was an honor to get you on the show. I appreciate you giving someone like me the time of day. I've only been in the podcasting realm for about a year and a half, maybe now. So it's an honor that I was able to get you on the show and really interview someone of your caliber, because I think what you did in St. Louis here for the organization as a whole when you were here was spectacular. I don't think that you had enough time to flourish when you were the head coach for the St. Louis Blues. I wanted to see what you had, because I do know that you had more in the tank there. But I just appreciate you giving me the honor and giving myself and Guy the honor of having this interview.
No, I appreciate that, Justin. And again, anytime, guys, I appreciate it. And I loved being on your podcast and continued success moving forward for you guys.
Thanks. And if you ever just want to drop our name anywhere when you're talking to other players, go ahead and do it. We don't mind.
Awesome stuff.
Right? Little self-promotion there. Well, everyone, I got to say thank you for all those that watched. I got as many of the comments as I could. I know I didn't get them all. When you have a guest like this, you got to kind of limit it. I thank you for promoting us tonight. Well, you know, there's a famous way that we end this show, and I think that we should still do that. Justin, how do we end our show, buddy?
I think we got to ask where are the girls.
Where are the girls?
What are you wearing?
A Canadian tuxedo. And I'm a hockey player. Let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.
Well, I guess it's that time, and I'm only going to do it one time. Justin, are you ready for the question?
I'm ready for the question.
Who's late for dinner?
Where are the boys? Where?
Hawaii Blues fan, we're bleeding blue with you. Let's go Blues! Let's go Blues! Let's go Blues!
This is Guy, the Hawaii Blues fan, for my co-host, Justin Eagle Eye Scott, putting out a big, huge round of applause to former Blues coach Drew Bannister for joining us tonight. Drew, thank you so much. We appreciate you for joining us.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks, Justin. You guys have a great night.
As you know, I will always be bleeding blue with you.
And as always, it's Let's Go Blues.
Mahalo, and thank you for watching the Blue Note Fan Report. This is Guy, the Hawaii Blues fan, saying we'll see you next time on the Blue Note Fan Report, along with Justin Eagle Eye Scott.